I'm Shawna Rosner, your host of In-House Counsel Chronicles. Today I am joined by Kelley Barnett. Kelley graduated with a BA from Michigan State and her JD from Case Western Reserve School of Law. Kelley has been practicing law for over 25 years. She started her legal career in the prosecutor's office, and after 7 years there, joined Franz Ward, where she worked as an associate, and 4.5 years later, elected into their partnership. After 12 years at Franz Ward, Kelley transitioned to an in-house counsel at AmTrust and currently serves as their senior vice president, senior managing counsel. Welcome to the podcast, Kelley.
Shawna, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So happy you're here with us. To start, why don't you share a little bit about AmTrust and your position?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I am SVP, senior managing counsel. My team is responsible for a few different practice areas: intellectual property, data governance, and some data privacy, labor and employment, technology agreements, other vendor agreements, and any litigation related to any of those practice areas that I mentioned. And then I personally provide a significant amount of advice and counsel to our senior executive team. And for those who aren't familiar with AmTrust, AmTrust is a global commercial and property insurance company. We operate in more than 70 countries. We are known for our workers' comp. In fact, we're the third largest workers' comp carrier in the U.S., but we actually carry a variety of product lines, business owners, commercial property, executive liability, insurance, cyber, general liability. I could go on, but that's the nuts and bolts of AmTrust. And I live in office.
Great. Thanks so much. Curious about what led you to make the move from working in the prosecutor's office at the start of your career to going into private practice, and how did you develop a specialty practice once there?
Yeah, great question. Joined the prosecutor's office. I really thought that I would be a lifer. Thought I would always be a prosecutor. It's something a passion I developed when I was in law school. It was a very honorable job. My goal was to be promoted to the major trial unit, which is the top trial unit in the county prosecutor's office. So you're prosecuting the county's most violent offenders. And it was wonderful. Honestly, I learned so much about being a litigator, crisis communications, thinking on your feet, problem solving, peering around the corner. Just a wonderful experience and has really shaped who I am as a lawyer. But I got to the point where I was starting to experience some burnout, not from all the work, because it was a lot of work. I've never been afraid of hard work. I love rolling up my sleeves and digging in and working hard. But the subject matter, as you can imagine, started to wear on me and impact me, after I left the office, which isn't surprising, right? Given some of the issues I was dealing with as a prosecutor and the cases and the victims that I was helping. But it got to the point where I decided that I needed to move on. So I put my feelers out. A former prosecutor who had joined Franz Ward about 5 years before I did. He was a former prosecutor. He was at the firm. He really liked it. He said, we're hiring for our litigation group, and we want people who actually have real trial experience and are comfortable walking into a courtroom. So I met with several of the partners at the firm and haven't looked back. It was a wonderful experience being there.
And you developed a specialty there within litigation, or?
What? I was a bit of a generalist at, which has served me well, and maybe we'll talk about that. Because I was a litigator, one of the great things about being the litigators, and any litigators listening will certainly appreciate this, is you're really good at figuring out problems, picking up a file, learning about it, even if it's something that's brand new to you, something, that you've never done before. And that's sort of how I shifted into Franz Ward. Anything that was litigation-based or looked like it was going to end up in trial, I dove right in. So it's probably easier to tell you what I didn't work on. I did have some specialties. So certainly product liability, labor and employment litigation, a lot of commercial business disputes, again, probably easier to tell you what I didn't do. I didn't do much. I did some due diligence work on deals, but not, actually drafting asset purchase agreements. A little bit of bankruptcy, but I really was a bit of a generalist with some specialty areas. And like I said, it really, really has served me well in my career. And it served me well at Franz Ward because I was able to really learn how to pick up a file and do anything and do it well.
So how did it serve you, fast forward, you were there for 12 years, you became a partner, and then you made a move to AmTrust. Did that generalization help with that transition?
Yes, and it really helps me now. And the reason I'm pausing a little bit is because I started at AmTrust. So backing up a little bit. When I did work for AmTrust, when I was at Franz Ward, I only did their labor and employment work. Okay. And so when they called me to inquire if I was interested about coming over, they were calling me to become their labor and employment counsel, which I wasn't honestly sure I was interested in doing because I didn't want to be siloed. So but I ended up taking the job, and maybe we'll talk about why. And at first I was just doing labor and employment. But as opportunities have arose, as I have spotted sort of gaps in certain practice areas, I've raised my hand. And the reason I felt comfortable raising my hand is because, like I said, as a litigator, you are used to just figuring it out. Something, you get a question, you get a phone call, you get an email, and you just figure it out. And that's really what being in-house for me is about. And so as more and more opportunities and practice areas opened up at AmTrust, I raised my hand, said, hey, let me take that on for you. Let me manage that attorney. Let me develop that talent. And I was able to do that because of my generalist background.
Yeah, I can see where that would be of help. And then why did you take the position at AmTrust that you weren't so sure you were going to take?
I was happy at Franz Ward. I'd been practicing almost 20 years, and I was talking to someone else about this recently, Shawna. I think it's pretty uncommon to go in-house at that stage in your career. Again, almost 20 years out. I didn't want to be siloed. They were only talking to me about being labor and employment counsel. But I knew that I was going to do a great job. And that if I did a great job, that when opportunities came along, and I believed that they would come along, and if I raised my hand, I would get those opportunities. So it was a little bit of a leap of faith. And also because AmTrust is a global company, I really wanted to, and I was interested in getting more of that international experience. And just the people are fantastic that I met. And I haven't looked back, honestly. I loved Franz Ward. I'm very connected to my friends at that firm still, but I have not looked back. It's been a wonderful experience here at AmTrust.
And when you came in, what was your title and how have you progressed to the position there you have now?
Actually, when I came in, I was an individual contributor, just, corporate labor and corporate counsel, labor and employment counsel. And within, I started in June, I think. By the beginning of the following year, so I joined the company in June of 19. So by the beginning of 2020 or early 2020, I was promoted to vice president. And then 2 years later in, I'd say early 2022, I was promoted to senior vice president, senior managing counsel, and started managing, a team. And I've hired some attorneys to join my team, also have a paralegal on our team. And so my responsibilities and my role has continued to evolve in the almost 6 years that I've been here. And that's one of the reasons I love this company is because if you work hard and you raise your hand, they'll give you a shot at anything, truly. And I think that's really important for people who have aspirations, whether it's in business or on the law.
And I imagine that's not the case, everywhere. I talk to a lot of in-house counsel and they don't always have that same experience and ability to make moves within kind of as quickly as you have, or really have that VP title, which is kind of what I wanted to ask you about. What does that actually mean?
So my VP title that I had after my first year, is that what you're talking about? Yes. Yeah. So it just, first of all, it gave me a lot more credibility when I was communicating with my executive team. I was counseling the C-suite team from the moment I started. Okay. And so having that VP title sort of gave me a little bit more credibility with them and also with others across the company, but it gave me more high-level projects to work on. I started doing more international projects with that title. I was not managing a team. It was just more responsibility outside of labor and employment.
And does it, I guess I'm wondering too, with a VP title, maybe in the one you have, now, does it give you a seat at the table with the C-suite at meetings or?
Yes, it does. And certainly now with my being a senior vice president, absolutely gives me a seat at the table. And frankly, I think I could have had a seat at the table before I had that title. I'm a big believer in you don't need a title to lead. You can raise your hand and get access if you're good at your job and you relationship build. And again, maybe we'll talk about that. But certainly once I had the title, it made it a lot easier for me to get involved in those high level conversations so I could influence outcomes and really help drive business outcomes.
And then are there any challenges that you faced when you made the move in-house, maybe that you weren't expecting?
Well, I'd say the toughest thing, but also one of the most important things about, working in-house is that you really got to know the business inside and out. And that was a big challenge for me. I knew that it was important. I'd done work for them, so I had some knowledge of the business, but really what I knew was just scratching the surface. I mentioned a few things earlier. I knew they were a global commercial, carrier. I knew they operated in multiple countries. I knew they had a number of product lines. But what I really needed to learn was, the underwriting side and what it means to be an underwriter and, the claims side, which is another important part of being an insurance company. And then the actuarial side, all the sort of moving pieces and parts that make us a great company, that make us run. It's not legal. We're not the ones, making the company run. We're helping. But it's the underwriting, the claims, the actuarial. It's those parts of the business that are critical to learn about. And it was just a lot of information. I mean, I did it. Lots of books, asking lots of questions. I'm a very curious person, and I make sure to always ask questions when I'm on a call with leaders or anyone at the company. But it was a bigger challenge than I anticipated.
But it sounds like you're able to navigate it, and you always find these outside sources for yourself, resources. And I know one of the other things that you touched upon a little earlier is relationship building. I can tell that's something that's important to you. Why is it important? How does it play into your day-to-day?
Well, and so I'll just focus, Shawna, on how it plays into my role as an in-house attorney. So, I view myself as a trusted advisor. Right. But you don't just walk in and become a trusted advisor. You have to build that trust. You can't just, answer questions, do legal work, and go home at the end of the day. I want the business folks to feel like they can come to me, even if they have something that they know carries some risk with it. I want them to come to me before there's a problem, ideally, not when there's a problem. And they're not going to do that if I don't have that relationship with them. And so I spent a lot of time relationship building with my C-suite. I did initially. Now I have pretty good relationships, I think, with all of them. And I'm very proud of that. But in order to be a great in-house attorney, you got to have the trust of the people you work with and the people you work for. And so the relationship building is critical. And you can't be a great in-house lawyer without it. You might be a great lawyer, but you won't be a great in-house lawyer.
So that's one of the biggest differences you see between being a private practice attorney and an in-house attorney?
Yes. I mean, certainly you have clients when you're at a firm, right? And you get those clients usually by relationship building and then making the pitch, making the ask. But, oftentimes you're parachuting in and out of those relationships, right? When there's a particular matter that you're working on, or there's a particular piece of litigation that's been filed. When you're in-house, there's always something. You're always working on something for your business leaders and your C-suite. And so the relationship is always important. And every communication, whether it's verbal or, an email or a text that I have with someone at my company, that is another effort that I'm making in relationship building and building their trust. And you got to build it and you got to keep it.
How do you keep it? Is there a little secret?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is being reliable, doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and also not being afraid to disagree. I think that's really important. I think the leaders that I work with respect the fact when I push back a little, when I disagree. I think a lot of people conflate disagreement with conflict. And they're two very different things. You don't have to have conflict just by pushing back and disagreeing. And disagreeing can lead to good business outcomes, good conversations, more information. And I think they respect that about me. So again, doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, not being afraid to respectfully disagree and speak up when you think you have something important to say that's going to help drive the outcome you're working on, and relationship building. Just keeping on with all the relationships, whether it's someone on the executive team or someone else in the company that you work with regularly.
So I know we were just talking about relationship building as it relates to being an attorney, but I know that building relationships is also important to you outside of your office. I know you volunteer a lot in the community, and that's really important to you. How have you managed a demanding legal career with giving back? And what do you want to share about that?
Ooh, I don't know if I've managed it. It's definitely a bit of a balancing act. I like to describe it as, I have to strike that right level of imbalance that works for me and my family. There's so many wonderful organizations and causes to support. I try to make sure that I'm spending what little spare time I have with those causes and organizations that are near and dear to my heart. I'm sure you can guess what some of them are, Shawna, but
right.
A lot of the things that I, spend my time on have to do with women and girls, right? So whether it's Ladder Down Cleveland, the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, I last summer did a little bit of a fundraiser for Girls on the Run in Northeast Ohio. In the fall, did a little bit of a fundraiser in connection with Ladder Down for Birthing Beautiful Babies, Birthing Beautiful Communities, which is another nonprofit in Cleveland that I recently learned about. So I try to focus just on those things that are near and dear to me. And, it also makes the other stuff that I do that sometimes isn't so bucket filling and, life giving. And it makes it all worth it, makes it better.
I understand that. I want you to share a little bit about Ladder Down. I know that's kind of your baby, and I don't think all our listeners know what it is. And I think it's such a great thing. I want you to be able to share a little bit about it.
Thank you. I love talking about Ladder Down Cleveland, of course. So Ladder Down Cleveland is the Cleveland chapter of Ladder Down, which is a national organization. I discovered Ladder Down, 2017, when I was down at a seminar in Florida. I heard people talking about it, and to make a long story short, it's a year-long leadership, business development, and mentoring program for women lawyers, typically women lawyers in law firms, solo practitioners, private practice, I should say. And we are self-run. Had to raise money ourselves to get launched and have to keep getting money every year to run the program. But it's a combination of about 30 hours of coaching to help women develop their leadership skills, to teach them how to practice law in their own personality, to also teach them how to pay it forward. They also connect with a lot of new women lawyers that they're new to them, at least. So they also build or expand their network of women lawyers. We also have a panel of, women judges, women rainmakers at firms, and also women chief legal officers, which we have a lot of in Northeast Ohio, as you know. So I'm really just scratching the surface here, Shawna, but it's just a tremendous tremendous organization. We've had more than 150 women go through the program. We are in the middle of year 7. And I think what's just so significant about it for me is that I really wasn't doing it for me, right? I mean, I was already 20 years into my practice when we launched in Cleveland, and I didn't realize what I would get out of it personally, which is just how much I learned from all these women. And the fact that I now know 150 to 250 more women lawyers in Northeast Ohio that I didn't know before. And those connections are so meaningful to me and just so bucket filling. And it's just a tremendous organization. And anyone who wants to know anything about it, call me. Happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I've talked to, many attorneys who have been a part of the program over the years, and I've always heard such great things about it. I think it instills so much in them. So glad it's still continuing and will continue to do so. You mentioned that wasn't around when you were a more junior attorney, which leads me to want to ask you, what advice would you give your younger self as a new lawyer entering the profession?
Wow, how many things can I talk about? So advice to my younger self. The first thing that I don't think I really appreciated at the beginning of my career, although I learned quickly enough, was that you need to start building your network early. So that means keeping in touch with people from law school that you enjoy spending time with, whether they stay local or they move away. Just keep in touch. Every job that I've had, whether someone's left or I've left, I've made sure to keep those connections. Again, people that I enjoy spending time with. I go to networking events. I love meeting people. Not everyone feels that way, right? Kind of a yucky word sometimes, but it really, I would not have every job that I've had, including prosecutor's office, Franz Ward, AmTrust, has been because I knew somebody. Not that I wasn't a good lawyer, not that I didn't earn the positions that, I ultimately obtained, but sometimes you just need to get your foot in the door before you even get considered. And my network has really helped me with that. The second thing I would say is start stepping out of your comfort zone early and often. Get comfortable with discomfort. It can be scary and at least intimidating, but that is really when the growth happens. And that is how you build resilience. And those two things have really served me well in my 25 years practicing.
That's great advice. And while we're talking about advice, I always like to end the podcast with the guest giving advice to any of our listeners who are aspiring to become in-house counsel, or those who are already in-house counsel and want to kind of move up within their company or another company. What do you have to share?
That's a great question. So I think first, let people know what you want. Don't assume that people know that you want to advance. I think there's a lot of assuming going on, and you just need to let people know that you're interested in more. Okay. Second, say raise your hand when there's an opportunity, whether it's an opportunity that you hear about or an opportunity that you identify, for example, because you see a gap in the law department or a gap in the business where you think you can be helpful and useful. Certainly for me, what's helped is learning more about finance, especially, including learning about how to read financial statements, how to read an income statement and a balance sheet. And more importantly, learning what stories those statements are telling you about your business. Networking, we talked about that, getting noticed by the people who are making the decisions about your career when you're not in the room. So that's another reason to network internally, especially if you want to advance at your current company. And then also figuring out and developing your own leadership style. I think that's really important.
Tell me about that real quick. You have developed your own leadership style. And I think we've talked before that leadership style is really important, to you. Tell me a little bit about yours and how you developed one.
Yeah, sure. I would describe myself as a servant leader. There are a lot of definitions floating out there as to what it is to be a servant leader. I mean, for me, what it means is rather than focusing on, business outcomes and results, I really try to focus on building an environment in which my team and, the others I work with outside my team, building an environment where they can thrive, where I'm empowering them. I'm putting their needs first so that I get their best work. And I feel like when I do that, I actually get the great business outcomes and the great business results. They just come when I do those things. It's really hard. I mean, everybody is different. Everybody on my team has a different learning style. They have different communication styles. I have to learn about them and understand their styles and build their trust so I can get their best. And it's a lot of self-reflection on my part and looking at how I'm showing up. And it's an exercise in curiosity and figuring out what's energizing them and what they don't like and what's dragging them down. But I got that from some of the wonderful leaders I've had over my career who sort of shared their power with me, gave me opportunities, certainly forced me outside of my comfort zone. I've had a growth mindset, got that from my mom at a very young age. And I think, I want the people on my team to be inspired the way I was inspired by the leaders I have. And I actually feel like it's my responsibility to help them do that.
Wow, it's such great insight. I really think that that's going to be beneficial for our listeners, no matter where they are in their career. And I really appreciate you sharing everything that you have today. Thanks for being my guest.
Thank you so much. And their podcast is great. I listened to your first episode and I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much. It's been exciting, I guess, Kelley.